This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Alrighty, we are here again in another episode of a more civilized podcast. Guys, this is episode 4. I'm frankly surprised that we have made it this far. I'm excited for today's episode. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. Today we're going to be talking about Disney's acquisition of all things Star Wars and sort of what that has meant for the franchise and the fandom. Can't wait to get into it. Oh yeah, I'm Kyler.
I'm Chris.
I'm Ross.
One day we will stop being just adequate, I promise.
We will always be at least adequate. Hopefully.
Oh.
Yeah. Pro podcast.
We promise consistent, reliable, an average of decent adequacy.
We're a solid meh.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so Ross, take away the news.
Yes. So, a couple things this week. It's a little bit light this week.
Yeah.
Kind of mining past weeks. First, though, we have an interesting note that has come up recently that Disney has announced that in its Star Wars park that it is building, almost done with actually, if I remember.
They're pretty close.
Is it next summer?
I think so. I think 2019 is when it releases.
Yeah. They're actually going to be serving alcohol in the cantina, which is apparently a departure for the park proper. Yeah, so they have
California Adventure does. They have places that serve adult beverages.
And I think there's apparently some other like VIP lounge.
Yeah, it's
somewhere.
like Club 23 or something like that serves, but it's not advertised.
Yeah.
In any
So
way.
there's been a small kerfuffle on Twitter about it, just because people make good points in, hey, they can now drink in the park, and then other people make the points of, well,
hey, now
there's people drinking in the park.
Yeah.
I don't want to be taking my kid to see Mickey Mouse and have some drunk in the gutter right next to where the characters are watching.
Which obviously it wouldn't get that bad, but still, yeah.
I'm sure, being Disney, this being their first foray into that, I'm sure they'll have some pretty strict limits on who's drinking how much and that sort of thing, as far as they can.
My question is, are they going to lace the blue milk? That's what I want to know.
That's a good question.
If they don't serve blue milk at the Star Wars Cantina, I mean, they've missed.
That is a
they've missed an opportunity.
Yeah. Other notable item with this, though, is that RX-24 will be the DJ of the Cantina. Because of course, we all know who that is.
Yeah.
No, that is the... Disneyland had a Star Tours ride that it's had for years and years and years. I remember going on it when we went as a kid.
So many times.
Yeah. Well, you know what? When we went to Disneyland when I was a kid, I didn't even realize that it was a Star Wars ride. I thought it was just going to be some generic, come and explore the cosmos, educational thing, right? Yeah. And so we did it like right at the end of the day, so there were no lines. But they have you wind through a room. The line winds through a room, and there's, R2-D2 sitting in one corner and C-3PO on the other side. Didn't really get to stop and look because we were just walking through. It was the last night of the ride of the night. So it was fun. Had good times. But yeah, he is the little pilot, quote-unquote pilot, that takes you through the experience as you're sitting in a rocking back and forth, platform. All the seats on the platform. Yeah. So it's a fun little presentation.
Yeah, I enjoyed that ride.
He'll be there, and so you should be excited. Next, we have rumors, the rumor mill. So, with the underperformance of Solo, Disney announced that they were kind of reevaluating their upcoming media plans, their movies, their standalones in particular. And so they had initially said that they were holding off on the Obi-Wan movie, which made me super sad. And the quote we have here is that there are no plans as such to do it as far as I know. I've been asked this question for years and years. I'd be happy to do it. There must be a good story to tell as they're doing spin-offs. There's likely to be a good Obi-Wan between me and Alec Guinness, and that's from Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, an interview that he did with Express.
Right. And so that's kind of been what everyone's been using to say that it's been canceled and canned. But usually the actor is not the person to reveal they're going to do a movie. And so even if they have talked to him, he's probably under a pretty strict NDA to not say anything. There are also other reports that they might be reevaluating the Obi-Wan movie to do on Disney's standalone streaming service.
Which I'd be fine with, honestly.
I'm kind of not a fan of Disney doing the service. I mean, the more I think about it and the more I hear it explained, the more I can see the reasoning, because there is a large library of just Disney stuff. Mm-hmm. But
and
still,
more importantly to Disney, there is money to be made.
Right. And I mean, it makes sense, but it's just like...
And I don't really care. If there's Star Wars to be had out there, I will find it and I will watch
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I'm sure it'll be on their service for all of about an hour before
That's
it shows
actually
up
the
on-
rumor, too, with Jon Favreau's live action, which is, I believe, happening next year.
Yeah.
That it's going to be on their streaming service. So I was like, well, Disney, fine. You've strong-armed me into, $20 a month or whatever you're going to charge.
And I hope they do something more like it releases immediately on the Disney service, and then they wait a couple months for Netflix or something.
I don't think
I don't
so,
know.
because the
Probably
whole
not.
point of their streaming service is to compete with Netflix.
Well, that's a steep climb because they only do their own properties.
Yeah, but there's a buttload of Disney-owned stuff on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like all of like the Disney Channel, like kids shows, Sophia the First, all that kind of stuff. All of the Marvel movies that are on there.
Yeah.
Star Wars movies that are on there.
Daredevil, all of like the Marvel,
The whole pantheon
like,
of Marvel stuff.
yeah, everything under Marvel. Yeah, the
They're
Star Wars
constant-
stuff that
yeah.
they do have
They're
on
constantly cycling through various animated movies of theirs on there.
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah, I mean, there's a buttload of stuff on Netflix that Disney can yank and start fresh with. Its own.
Also, Disney just acquired a good chunk of Fox,
Yes, it is.
including their entire movie catalog
Yeah.
with all
yeah,
sorts
so
of
there's all
studios
kinds of
and-
stuff Disney can put on there to just give the finger to Netflix.
The funny thing about it, though, is that with that acquisition with Fox, Disney also now owns Hulu.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't
Which
know
is
that.
why I find their decision to continue forward with their Disney streaming service an interesting one.
Yeah. Oh, maybe.
Apparently, they're aiming for a lot of the more adult fare that they own and or have acquired through Fox to go on Hulu, where the more Disney family-friendly stuff is going to end up on the Disney streaming service. Is the last thing I heard, and that was like a month ago.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
'Cause Disney does have some pretty strict rules about what they can show or what they want to show in certain
Yeah, what
things.
they,
Well,
they
'cause
want,
they've
they
got
want to keep
their-
a certain brand.
Yeah, they've got their
Yeah.
brand image, exactly.
Well, and it helps them kind of start to separate and branch out. If they're going to put all the kid stuff on the Disney proprietary streamer and then do all the little bit more adult themed things on Hulu, that lets them kind of bend some of their own rules. Like, incidentally, you can't ever see a beheading on a Disney film, apparently, is a rule.
Oh, what a shame.
So, I mean, it kind of makes me
So many
wonder...
kids wanting to see those beheadings. Used to be family-friendly entertainment. Let's take them out to see the executions. But
I mean-
nowadays, jeez.
with Star Wars propensity of lopping off body parts. In
Yeah,
fact,
that's fair.
have we seen heads in Star Wars yet? Has
Yes, Dooku. We didn't see
we
it,
did,
but he
that's
did
right.
get
Yeah.
beheaded.
Dooku was
And you
off-
do
was
see like
off.
the head on the floor.
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
some.
So
We also saw Luke behead a Phantom Vader, which then revealed
Yes.
his face.
true.
Yes.
And we do actually see like on screen Luke's hand get cut off.
Yep.
Like that is all.
So there's
on
plenty.
Screen.
Star Wars is well known for dismemberments.
That's why
so
I love
still
it.
remember playing Jedi Outcast and just
Yeah.
being like, "Ooh, look at all the dismemberment I can do." This
Well, and then you could even turn on the extra dismemberment. Like, I don't know if it was a
did.
mod or something, but yeah, where it actually did, where your lightsaber hit instead of just.
Oh, that's
zones.
cool.
just general, yeah, it
Yeah.
was nice.
It was really cool. Anyway, that doing something on Hulu might help them get around their own rules on that.
Now,
so.
as a different direction with the Obi-Wan movie news, I do not want them to release an Obi-Wan movie straight to their streaming service because I do not want them to make an Obi-Wan movie at all.
Oh.
I don't. It's too much. We have seen so much of Obi-Wan's life already, and if you're going to try and shoehorn in some massive adventure any sort of adventure that it's an adventure, but it's not an adventure that ever quite manages to attract any attention because he was totally hidden this whole time, guys, and nobody ever saw him. I have a hard time trusting in any movie makers that they're going to actually skirt that line properly. He's going to get discovered, and then he's going to have to do all sorts of stuff to stop himself from being found or that sort of stuff. I don't want to see it. He had a super eventful life.
Yeah.
He retired forcibly in hiding, and then he was in hiding. I don't want a bunch of adventures that happened there. He was just in hiding.
I'm a big Obi-Wan fan, and so
I love Obi-Wan.
I'd love to
both
see it.
Guinness and McGregor. We discussed this before.
Here are
but-
my thoughts on it. If they're going to do an Obi-Wan movie, now's the time to do it because Ewan McGregor is about halfway between his age in the prequel trilogy and Alec Guinness in A New Hope. So, like, if they're going to do it, strike while the iron's hot. It's got to be now.
Yep.
That being said, I totally agree with you, Chris, that it's how do you skirt that line where he is supposed to be hidden watching over Luke, not attracting the attention of the Empire, but then how do you have a compelling story with a hermit living in the mountains. Now, that being said, the main Star Wars comic, right? What it's just Star Wars, that's going on right now. Marvel's Star Wars. We're actually going to talk about this a little bit later in the episode, but they did a series, like 5 issues, something like that, from the journals of Ben Kenobi, that sort of talk about the things that he actually did have to do to step in to protect Luke, while also consciously going, okay, I can't do this because that will bring too much attention. How can I, solve this problem, protect Luke, while not and the comics handled it fairly well. Like, there are some times where, like, Luke being a dumb preteen, and this is just set a couple years before the events of A New Hope, so he's maybe like 12 or 13 as opposed to 17, 18. He's out doing dumb things and like pisses off some of like Jabba's people or whatever. So they're coming actually to the Owen Lars homestead to collect, their due basically, and he steps in and like murders them all and like, makes it look like Tusken Raiders did it or whatever to keep, throw off the scent or whatever. So like there is a possibility of them doing it. But you're right, it's very risky, and I don't know that filmmakers could be trusted.
See, and that's the thing, what I would want... Now, and a skilled storyteller can make a solid story in any situation. It's always going to be possible, even if I think it's improbable. But what I would really want is something that is just wholly unusual for Star Wars.
Yeah.
I would want something that is like, there would be some action, there would be some awesome moments of, crowning moments of awesome where Rule of Cool lets us see some fun stuff. That's inevitably going to happen in any Star Wars story, but I would rather have just something unusually quiet for Star Wars, unusually like dramatic or serious instead of action-packed. I'd almost want. I want to see I want to see a romance with Obi-Wan and someone, and just have an actual I want a rom-com. But just why not? Because that's the thing is the more Star Wars they're going to make, the more they're going to have to diversify if they're going to keep it fresh. So why not?
The books have already started to do that. Lost Stars is sort of their
Lost
love
Stars.
I have heard about
Lost Stars is fantastic. It is still probably my favorite book in the new canon that I've read. It's really great.
I've heard good things.
Ciena Ree is my favorite.
Asterisk. It's because it's all Empire stuff, and Kyler's very Empire.
No, it's not all Empire.
It's basically.
It's half and half.
Basically.
Spoiler alert for Lost Stars, these 2 kids grow up on a planet together. One sort of rich, one sort of poor. The boy is more wealthy, the girl is less wealthy. And their planet gets occupied by the Empire, and everything's all great and wonderful, and the Empire's here to protect us, because that's the spiel the Empire sells you when they first come to your planet. They both end up getting into the Imperial Academy. Even though they both sort of grow disillusioned a little bit with the Empire, her culture, which is the older culture of this planet, sort of prevents her. Ciena Ree is who I'm talking about. She's so great. Her sort of sense of honor prevents her from breaking this vow that she has made to the Empire, that she will serve the Empire loyally for her whole life. So even though she grows disillusioned, she doesn't feel she can leave the Empire. While the boy is basically, once he gets disillusioned, he's like, you know what, screw this, the Empire's terrible, and he joins the rebellion. And from that point on, it's sort of half and half. It'll go through his story, then it'll come back to hers, then it kind of intertwines.
Well, his story is still very heavily colored by his experience in the Empire. I mean,
as is half the people in the rebellion.
Anyway,
sorry.
I'm.
We're not even.
Yeah, we've had books like that. If you look at the old canon, which we'll get into more later, but if you look at the old canon, there's all sorts of Star Wars tales. They had a huge pile of books that they wrote, and all sorts of things were made. And there's love stories, there's this, there's that, but in the movies, we've never gone that direction.
In Clone Wars, we do see a little bit, though,
have some.
romance with Obi-Wan and Duchess Satine of Mandalore.
Yeah, we have some here and there, but again, in the movies, we've never had a movie that was just, we're going to focus on exclusively, the driving force of this is the romance. Even Attack of the Clones, the driving force of that movie is not the romance. Right? It's the politics.
Yeah.
And the romance is involved. It might have been a driving force if it had been done well, but it wasn't. And so I want to see a movie where the stakes are much more personal and smaller, and that's why it never attracts Imperial attention, because it never blows up.
That would be really cool, actually, to see Obi-Wan on Tatooine falling in love with somebody. There is no Jedi Order to adhere to anymore, so maybe that would be interesting.
Or maybe he adheres to it anyway because
the forbidden love kind of a thing.
Because Obi-Wan very much strikes me as the white knight.
No, he does.
He's not gonna.
He and he wouldn't. But yeah, that would be interesting. That would be kind of a tragic romance movie. That would be cool.
So Disney, if you have someone make this, I will buy that movie. I don't care if it ends up being crap. Just for appreciation of you trying that, I will buy it.
There we go. Now they'll do it.
I am sure for that $20 DVD Blu-ray sale, you will be willing to make this.
And our last note in news, incidentally, is this still off of the screenshots that we shared?
No, those are
couple
like
episodes
in
ago?
like kind of like a savannah looking thing. It looked
Well,
like.
for when you see faux.
He's doing it again.
I know. Honestly, I don't even ship that anyway, but they're just always together. Finn and Poe, you do see them on that field, but there were the Millennium Falcon shots that.
Yeah, and I thought there was like an
finding.
X-wing shot or something. Anyway,
There
yeah,
might
so
be another
possible jungle planet involved in 9.
So,
They
yeah.
might be. I wonder if they are dipping into the Legends, where there's like a Jedi Academy on Yavin again. I wonder if maybe if that's where they're going again with this. I don't know. We'll see.
That would be interesting.
We'll see next Christmas.
Yes.
I mean, there's probably going to be lots of rumors surrounding that because I know they went back to the same soundstage that they filmed all the Yavin stuff on, both in A New Hope and in Rogue One. But the caveat to that is that's a very well-used soundstage for a lot of movies.
And also, they filmed all the Jakku scenes in the same areas that they filmed the Tatooine scenes.
Did they?
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah.
I didn't know that.
And so a lot of people assumed it was going to be Tatooine, and it wasn't. It was some other
Thankfully.
desert planet.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I appreciate not going back to Tatooine for
Yeah.
7 films in a row.
Yeah.
Well, we skipped out on Tatooine for Empire, but so 6 films. But but at the same time, it's kind of like that feels kind of. I don't know if this really. Anyway, no, it's good. I agree. I'm glad that they
Give
did
us
that.
a little bit of variety. Show us
Yeah.
other planets.
Even if it looks the same.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a 1 biome planet, desert is the most convincingly plausible. So
Yeah. Well, who cares about the 1 biome planets? Not me.
I don't care about them, but I'm just saying that. Yeah, if we're gonna show multiple planets of a similar biome, then go for desert. Yeah.
Alrighty, we are now ready to begin the body of our episode. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. We've all been very excited to talk about this. We're talking about as I mentioned earlier, the acquisition of Star Wars by Disney. But just by way of detail here, October 30th, 2012 is when the announcement was made that Disney would be purchasing Lucasfilm and all of its everythings for $4.05 billion with a B dollars. That's a lot of money, and at the same time, so not a lot of money compared to now that they've acquired. Well, yeah, that true, the Fox acquisition, but it's like $4.05 billion. They almost made that back with their first 2 movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's so crazy.
At the time, it was like, holy cow, they just paid this much for it. Now, looking at the Fox deal, it's like, wow.
Yeah, like $73
that used to
billion
seem like
or
so
whatever.
much.
Yeah, and then on December 21st of that same year, 2012, is when all of the paperwork was finally signed and the deal was actually concluded. And yeah, Lucasfilm then became a wholly owned subsidiary of Disney. And all of its parts were, renamed and sorted into the greater Disney hierarchy there. So that's sort of the business timeline there of what happened. So now we can actually have our discussion. So one of the biggest things, and obviously, or for me anyway, the biggest change, because I don't really care who owns Star Wars or who's making it, just as long as Star Wars is getting made, so that I have more of it. But what it did for me, which I really appreciated, and I think we're going to have divergent opinions here for a little bit, is it reorganized the Star Wars canon. So canon, of course, being like official, right? It made reorganized what was official and what wasn't. And just to give you a sample of how confusing it was before Disney's purchase, there were 6 different levels of Star Wars canon. The first canon is G canon, George Lucas canon. Okay, so anything that Lucas made or said could be said on an interview, at a panel somewhere, written down on a napkin. If George Lucas touched it, that was the top tier of canon.
If you're on TV tropes, that would be known as the Word of God trope.
Right.
Was that infallible? Like,
yes, whatever he said, that was canon.
So, but like, if he was just kind of
changed his
spitballing
mind.
ideas.
Yes.
He did change his mind often,
And he
which
did.
was another complication.
And that was part of the problem, is that he would change his mind or adjust previous opinions, but then those opinions contradicted other things. But yeah, so it was already at the highest tier of canon where nothing is supposed to contradict this level of canon. It was already contradicting itself.
Yeah.
In some instances. Not often, but some. The next tier of canon was T-canon, television canon, Clone Wars, and what would have been Lucas's live-action TV show that he was developing.
Was he doing one?
Mm-hmm. He had an idea and had like a tentative sort of plot outline for an underworld, a Coruscant underworld TV show.
Okay.
What period was that in?
It would have been in I believe the original trilogy era.
No, I mean, like, what period of real-world time was that in?
Oh, this was after Clone Wars had already been on the air.
Okay.
And he was like, oh, what if we did a live-action show? I've got money. I could
Sounded
do
like
it.
it would have to be post-prequel.
Right.
Uh-huh, yeah. And so, but then he obviously sold it to Disney and couldn't do anything with it other than that. But, and the thing with these previous levels of canon is anything in your level of canon is not supposed to contradict anything in a canon tier above the one that you're at. So the television canon, which is below George Lucas canon, is not supposed to contradict anything that George Lucas has made or said. But other than that, you can go hog wild. Then below that, you had C canon. T canon and C canon, by the way, used to be one category, but then it was changed a couple of years before Disney bought it to elevate TV, the Clone Wars, above any book or comic. So C canon is continuity canon. Books, comics, video games, cartoons that might have been written or whatever, anything sort of like that was C canon, generally considered canon. Anything they say goes, so long as it doesn't contradict anything in T canon or G canon. But again, the further you descend, the more crazy it gets, particularly in the books, because the books can contradict themselves and not break canon, which happened a lot,
Right.
but as long as they don't contradict the movies. And so you get a lot of like, well, this is what happened with Han and Chewie after Return of the Jedi. And then another book comes out, no, this is what really happened with Han and Chewie. And so you have all these conflicting stories. Some of the authors tried to work with each other and be like, hey, what are you planning on? What's your story? Okay, I don't want to, I want to work with you rather than against you. Others didn't care. It was a giant mess. Then below that is S canon, secondary canon. Anything that might be of use or not to the authors. This could be deleted scenes. It could be notes like, project notes from George Lucas's house. Like literally, it could be almost anything is secondary canon. But we don't usually see canon. D canon was detours, anything used for Star Wars detours, which was supposed to be sort of mostly parody and just joking, not really to be taken seriously. Then below that is N canon, which is not canon. What if stories. Interestingly enough, deleted scenes from the movies fall into the lowest non-canon category, unless they're referenced somewhere else, in which case they become canon. And that was the thing, is every single tier could potentially pluck something from a tier below it and elevate that one thing to canon.
You've got canceled projects here.
Yeah, canceled
And I would also
projects in
add-
non-canon.
I would also add to this list anything from any of these canons that was rendered defunct by the creation of the prequels.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole lot of backstory for that 30-year period that then immediately became non-canon.
Exactly,
once the prequels
because a
came out.
higher tier of canon had...
Because George had his own
trumped
ideas
it.
and did not really bother to pay much attention
Yeah.
to what had been written,
So
except where he drew from what had been
Yeah, it was so it was such a mess. You had a massively tangled web. For instance, one example of this that comes to my just right off the top of my head is a deleted scene from episode 3. So this deleted scene is non-canon. It doesn't count. It never happened, right? Is General Grievous captures Shock T.
Oh, yeah, I remember that
And
scene.
stabs her, and this is right before... This is
when they're trying to save
when
the
they're trying to save the Chancellor. They're running, they get trapped in like the little ray shield in the hallway, and Grievous shows up. There's a deleted scene where Grievous then pulls out Jedi Master Shock T from the Jedi Council and runs her through with a lightsaber in front of them. They can't do anything about it. that scene got deleted. So it's no longer canon. Until the Clone Wars, season 5, I believe it is, Yoda has a Force vision, and in this blurry Force vision, you see General Grievous run Shaak Ti through on the Providence-class battleship. That moment then became canon. Even though it was a deleted scene, now it has been used and referenced in Clone Wars, so it's canon.
By the time they went into the prequels, didn't they have some sort of think tank that was trying to keep this all straight?
They did. That was the holocron that we mentioned last episode.
So
that was there, but the holocron decided, nope, that is no longer canon, cut it out. It's in N canon. It's still there. It's the actual, line in the database is there, but it's marked N canon, so it doesn't count. Until Clone Wars comes along and says, no, we'd like that. We're going to lift this out of the depths of hell and put it in here in T canon, where we are the second highest level of canon.
Right.
So now all of a sudden that one moment is now canon. And that kind of thing where you had higher tiers of canon plucking from lower tiers happened all the time. But it was always piecemeal like that. So it's like, well, your book sucks, I didn't like it, but I do like this one page of dialogue that you had. So I'm going to use that for my book or whatever, and now it's canon again, or whatever it might be. It was a huge mess. So when Disney took over, this is what canon became. So April 24th, 2014, so Disney completes their purchase in December of 2012, and really nothing new gets made for Star Wars except the last little bit of Clone Wars, because they already had the contract with what was it? It's Cartoon Network is where it was aired at the time. And they already had their contract, and Disney said, you know what, we're not going to mess with that. You guys finish out your contract with Cartoon Network. You keep making Clone Wars till your contract is up, till the end of this year, then we'll take a look at it. So for like a year and a half, from December of 2012 till April of 2014, nothing new is being made for Star Wars except Clone Wars. No books, no comics, no nothing. And Disney then, April 24th, 2014, says, okay, here is what is now canon, because this question had been sort of hanging in the air for a year and a half of people going, well, what about all these books that we loved? What about these comics? What about the holiday special? What about the Ewok cartoons, right? What is happening with canon? What counts, what doesn't?
Yeah.
And so April 24th, 2014, Disney says, okay, here is what is currently canon. The 6 films, episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the Clone Wars movie, and the Clone Wars TV show. That is it. Everything else is no longer canon. It doesn't count. It didn't happen. That part of the Star Wars universe is just totally expunged. We reserve the right, however, to pluck stories or elements that we feel are good and put them into a new canon that actually doesn't contradict itself, that is more flowy than what the mess George Lucas had before. So yeah, basically anything produced after Disney bought it, that is canon. Anything produced before Disney bought Star Wars is no longer canon.
And everything from the old canon that is no longer canon is now called the Legends canon, is Disney's official term for it. Right. And that's why the title of this is Legends versus Disney. And
the reason they call it Legends is, there is a lot of good material in the former EU, expanded universe. There's a ton of good in there. And so what they said is basically we can treat these stories as, well, I heard that Luke Skywalker did this, but it's not actually confirmed. That all these stories are just stories that people in the Star Wars universe tell, but they're not confirmed. They're not actual stories. Anything that we, Disney, produce is actual fact. It is recorded in Star Wars history as having happened. With the exception, interestingly enough, of the book produced by Disney, so it is canon, but the premise of the book, which is Legends of Luke Skywalker, is specifically hearsay stories from characters around the Star Wars universe recounting stories that they have heard of Luke Skywalker. Some of them really pretty good. One in particular is awful. I don't remember who the author is, but essentially it's the story of a sentient flea living on Salacious Crumb, the little monkey in Jabba's palace, who basically orchestrates Luke's whole plan successfully in Jabba's palace to free Han Solo. It's terrible.
We're going to talk badly about it. Probably best you don't know who the author is.
Oh my gosh, it's such a bad story. Ugh.
No need to badmouth them. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And don't think for a second I'm not bringing that up next episode. Oh, next episode's going to be great, guys. Can't wait. So, Chris, take this next one. I think you're sort of...
Okay, which the benefits of changing here? I think you're more on the benefits of changing.
I've
seen both of them.
Yeah. So the benefits of changing the canon is Disney no longer has to tiptoe around 40 years of story being written. Yeah. Lots and like half of which probably contradicts itself.
It's the same reason that George didn't bother to pay attention to the extended universe when he made his prequels. It's just it's a lot of work to try and keep everything in sync, and it's just not feasible, which is one of my problems with Disney's attempt to do it, is that in the long run it's not, but we'll get to that with the disadvantages.
Well, but the thing, it's difficult to keep everything in line when your policy for years has been, I mostly don't care what you write.
Yeah. No,
Go
that's
for
fair.
it. Write
George
whatever you
wasn't
want.
trying, and so Disney is going to make a greater effort,
and so
which I can appreciate.
That is where I think the problem comes in. Had George all along been like, I need to hear your story, I need to know the plot, I need to approve this so that it stays consistent, which is what Disney does now, I think there might have been less problem. But George Lucas's policy for the most part was, I don't really care what you write. You want to pay me my money to let you use the Star Wars universe, okay, whatever, go write what you want. He mostly didn't care. There were some authors that he did take an interest in and was like, oh, I'd like to know your story. Oh, okay, yeah, this would probably be a good way to take this aspect or whatever. But for the most part, he didn't care, and that's where the problem came in. Is then Disney's going, well, geez, we've got more contradictions than not in a lot of cases. How do we do this? Let's just erase it. And I think it was absolutely the right call. I know there are a ton of fans out there who are, pulling their hair out right now and rage flipping their listening device as I say this, but absolutely the right call.
I agree that it was the right call because of everything you're saying, and I've said in previous episodes that the closest analogy we have to what's happening here, this most similar situation, is what we see in comics. And generally speaking, comics reboot themselves every few decades. DC in particular, or less, DC in particular reboots itself. It has had several major just company-wide reboots where they just go, you know what, we're going to wipe huge amounts of stuff out of existence. Back in the 70s was one of the biggest ones where the Superman comics, like, you think he's super powerful now, his list of powers had grown so ludicrously impossible to manage. And the only thing the story they could ever write with him was kryptonite stories, because that's the only weakness he had. And so they wrote out of existence like 70% of his powers and just kept the core stuff that we still have, or maybe even less at that time. And they also got rid of kryptonite. Like, it was still around, but he was no longer vulnerable to it. They had a scene where he ate a chunk of kryptonite that a villain tried to stop him with and joked that it needed salt and then moved on. Just to try and remove that. But that's the thing, is the bigger it grows, the more you're inevitably going to have to do that. But and Marvel has not officially rebooted their universe until very recently. That was not a thing they did. But even then, both DC and Marvel have various worlds where you have different versions of Spider-Man, you have different versions of Superman and Batman, you have all these different, so that they can do all these different things. And even Marvel, while not officially just wiping the slate on their world, has had some revisionist history.
I think we kind of talked about this last episode with wiping things, and we're going to make a Superman for everybody or a Spider-Man for everybody. That way everybody's happy. I think it works better in like the superhero universe, where alternate universes or parallel universes or whatever is more of like a thing that exists in that world. And so it doesn't feel as jarring when they're okay, we're going to wipe things. This is now, version number 326 of Planet Earth.
Which is why with Star Wars, they have had to do it exclusively through either we're just going to ignore what came before, this is more or less a reboot with the prequels and with Disney, or with just saying, you know what, we're not going to pay that much attention and you can just write whatever. So we'll get to the disadvantages later. But
I think that's why people with Star Wars are so upset about it, because there are so many people that really fell in love with the stories of the EU, and there are tons of actually really good stories. One that I read when I was in junior high, loved it, was the X-Wing series. Really well written, good story, interesting characters. It was like 4 books or something like that. It was really good. And then they're like, wait, you're just erasing all this? There is no parallel universe where this gets to live?
I was also jarred.
Yeah, it's, and I think, like, because in the Star Wars fandom, people are kind of upset by the dissolution and erasure of the EU, where you don't see quite that same level of upset in comic book or, like, superhero universes, because people go, well, oh, this is what they're doing now? Well, that's okay. That's happening in that version of reality. I'm going to stay with the one that I like, and that's okay because that's literally like a mechanic of this fandom, whereas that doesn't exist in Star Wars, and so people get a little bit cranky when they're
and it's going to be hard either way. But and like I said, I agree it was the right move. It's just I feel like it's going to have some interesting repercussions that Disney is not preparing for, and already is having those repercussions on a lot of people, and we'll discuss that in the disadvantages section. So. You've got some examples here of the more unified canon.
Yeah, well, those were my notes from this morning. I thought this warranted a separate discussion, but then now I realize that we're actually talking about it as part of what we're talking about.
Go for it.
But no, it was just an example of the more unified canon with the Disney purchase. The way that they're able to now, everyone's working together beforehand. In particular, there is a scene in Last Jedi where you're looking around Luke's hut and there's a little round kind of disc, really thick disc thing sitting on his end table. It's a compass. And it was first shown a month beforehand in the Battlefront 2 game. Games are doing a lot of things with their cutscenes where they want to have a kind of a story to go with their single player experiences. Even though Battlefront was very much an online multiplayer competitive type thing, they'll give you a token story to kind of get used to the mechanics and things. But to do that, they also like to show a little bit of a story. And with this new canon, they were working on Battlefront at the same time that Rian Johnson was working on Last Jedi. And so they were able to actually come together and be like, hey, we have this concept art for this thing that's going to be in Luke's hut. And the people that were working on Battlefront came in like, hey, could we use this? I mean, can we... And they all sat and talked about how this is actually the compass that showed Luke where this temple was, the Anaktu, that he has retreated to, and gave it its own little backstory. He got it from actually a secret cache that the Emperor had. That in the game, the guy you're playing with was supposed to go destroy in the event of the Emperor dying. So, they have this interesting little...
See, and I'm so angry at the new Battlefronts that I haven't played them. So I... didn't know that. That's a really cool thing, but that also, again, just Disney is great at synergy, I think, at tying their various angles of their products and franchises together. Because in the Shattered Empire comics that came out for Force Awakens in 2015, they did a 4-issue miniseries. Part of what happens in that series is Luke, and they've done this too in other books too, now that I think about it. But yeah, Luke is basically raiding Palpatine's caches of Force-sensitive stuff to try to regain and rebuild and understand better the Jedi Order. Yeah. And they show that in Shattered Empire. They show that in... I'm trying to think of some of the books. I can't remember the other books that show it, but sorry, guys. Yeah. But Shattered Empire, yeah, he gets 2, like, Force-sensitive trees. Yeah, that are like, there were like 2 trees that are like sensitive to the Force. I don't know, whatever. It's it's Star Wars, so who cares? And he actually gives one to a woman named Shara Bay, who is the mother, if I'm not mistaken, of Poe Dameron.
Oh.
He takes one to plant at his new Jedi Academy, and he gives one to Shara Bay, who's Poe's mama. So... yeah, that's the night he was conceived, too, now that I think about it. Anyway, Poe's mom was...
So wait, what you're saying is Poe's going to be a Force user?
No, I'm just saying Poe was conceived under auspicious circumstances. But yeah, Poe Dameron's mom was an A-Wing pilot in Green Squadron at the Battle of Endor. Poe's dad was one of Han Solo's commandos taking down the shield generator. So they actually spent the whole battle not knowing if the other person had survived. And then at the Ewok party, she's asking around for him, and they find each other. And she's like, by the way, Luke Skywalker gave me a tree. Want to go make a baby?
So wait, Luke was supposed to be raiding those caches before the Battle of Endor?
Yeah, Luke was always looking for different caches of Force relics and things wherever he could find them, because he knew his responsibility was to rebuild the Jedi Order, but being someone who has never even been alive while the Jedi Order was a thing, and most of the Jedi Order's relics were either confiscated by the Empire or destroyed, yeah, he was always looking around for different things to take to help him understand what the Jedi Order is supposed to be and how to rebuild it and things. So yeah, and lots of the comics and books and things that Disney's released show him hunting things down, on different worlds and looking for things. Yeah, so Luke picking up whatever he felt like of the old Jedi teachings. So that's the old canon, yeah, where he's picking and choosing, oh, the Jedi did this well, the Jedi didn't do that well. I guess that is kind of happening. I mean, in Episode 8, that was basically his motivation is, well, they screwed everything up, so I'm going to quit. But save it for the Last Jedi show. Save it for the Last Jedi show.
We're going to have to do that soon.
It is. It's coming up
soon. Yeah.
It's coming up soon. Otherwise, listener, we will Chris and I in particular are going to explode over The Last Jedi. It takes all the willpower I have not to just rant on and on about it. So yeah, we've got the Is The Last Jedi Good or Not episode coming up here soon, and that's going to be...
Which may end up being a Last Jedi and Rogue One episode, because if he's going to rant on Last Jedi, I want to rant on Rogue One.
Well, we have one dedicated to Rogue One as well.
Yeah, but we talked about maybe doing this together.
Oh, did we? Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll see. We'll see, listeners.
Oh, man. So any more benefits, disadvantages?
We've got a couple here below those.
So, again, those are mine as well.
Oh, okay.
And we've kind of touched on them already, because you have years and years and years and years worth of expanded universe. You have books, you have movies, you have... were they doing comics?
Yes.
In the EU?
And some of them are really bad.
Marvel has had comic rights to Star Wars for
a long time, and then it briefly went to Dark Horse Comics, and then when their contract expired, since Disney had in the intervening years acquired Marvel, it went back to Marvel, and Disney then has full control over it.
Nice. But so you have all this stuff that people have been reading for years. We've been reading books since I was in junior high.
One of the bad things in the comics, by the way, one of the earliest, I think it might have actually been the first Star Wars comic, there's essentially a green Bugs Bunny in like a Buck Rogers spacesuit. It's bad. It's really bad. There's a lot of bad out there.
Worse than Boba Fett riding the Loch Ness Monster?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so.
But anyway, but with that mountain of information and lore, and for all of that to just kind of go away, there's this aspect of just like, well, I've just wasted my life. Why get back into it now? Because everything I knew is gone. I have to start from the beginning. Why do I have to invest in this again now? I know there were some that kind of jumped off at that point. People I went to school with and things like that. I think as a whole, I think most people are still just kind of okay for getting back in the ride. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get back into it as much as we had, because I have grown up and don't have as much time.
And this is a good time to share another Kyler story here. So as I mentioned earlier in the episode, I read Star Wars books before, so the old EU, but not as many as people might think, and only for like a year, maybe 2 years, something like that. It was in junior high, 8th and 9th grade. I think actually mostly 8th grade that I read them. But I read the X-Wing series, which I believe is 4 books, and really quite good. I read The Courtship of Princess Leia, which had, I think it was overall mostly not great, but it did have one really cool moment when it's towards the end of the book, and the Night Sisters on Dathomir are chasing after him. They're riding their Rancors and stuff like that, and Han Solo gets in the Millennium Falcon and lights the engines up, and the fire, like the heat or whatever coming out of the engines, roasts all the Night Sisters. I was pretty jazzed about that. And then I also read Truce at Bakura, which in the old timeline takes place immediately after the Battle of Endor, like 5 days after or something like that is when the book starts. And I read both The Courtship of Princess Leia and Truce at Bakura specifically because in the complete guide to vehicles and vessels that I got at like a book fair in 5th grade, they mentioned the Sea Ruvi and the Happen battle dragons and whatever, and I was like, who the heck are these people that are not in movies? But in the book it would say like, oh, well, in Courtship of Princess Leia it mentions, the Happen dynasty or whatever. And so I read those books just to know what these ships went to in this technical book that I had.
See, I always wanted to do A Courtship of Princess Leia. I've never got the opportunity. I did I did a couple of the X-Wing series. Did all the Thrawns, all 5 of them, not just 3.
No, there's the trilogy, and then there's the
two more
the
companions.
pair that came later, but
Right.
those aren't actually Thrawn.
Yeah, well,
It's kind of like
They're
Ender
Thrawn
Shadow
related.
and Ender's...
Yeah, they're Thrawn related, but it's not.
it is. It's a Thrawn clone. Come on, so it is Thrawn. but
No, it's not. It's a dude in makeup.
All
pretending
clones
to
are
be
the
Thrawn.
same,
hold
Ross.
on.
Is that what you're saying?
the one that was acting as the face of Thrawn,
Right,
yes,
right,
was
okay.
the dude in makeup.
But the one that was, yeah, that's right. But
The battle
even so,
plan
it
that he was following, and
yeah.
the
it
thing
was
that-
it was deliberately designed by Zahn to follow up on his original trilogy.
Man, listen
but
to these
they
two
are two
nerds
separate
going on.
Two
Hey,
separate
you
stories.
But I mean, it's still Thrawn. Come on, it's fine.
Eh.
It's fine. Anyway,
So I am in the fortunate position, and it sounds like you guys mostly are in kind of the same boat, but with different series, in that I didn't get like super deep into the old EU and read like all the books that were out there.
I
or...
didn't read all the books, but I knew most of like I said earlier on. I literally read the Star Wars encyclopedia cover to
Yeah.
cover.
So
I
I
knew all
guess
of
so
the
you're maybe a
story.
little bit more into it than I was, but like I didn't ever feel like super invested in the old EU. So and part of the reason I didn't get super invested, even though I love Star Wars, I was in junior high, so my attention span was about half a second. I was like, man, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of Star Wars books. I don't know that I will ever have time to get through all of them. Because I was I'm trying to catch up on, at that point, like 30 years of Star Wars novels being written. I'm going, geez, I don't know. And so I read hardcore, like every day at lunch I was reading those books. And then by the end of the year, I was like, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from Star Wars. I'll come back to it, maybe in a year or something and read more, because I do love Star Wars. And then I just never got back into it. And I thought, man, it's just too much. I'm going to give up. So when Disney wiped it all away and said, we're going to just start releasing new books, I was like, hey, here's a chance for me to actually stay caught up on everything that's canon, because I can read a book when it comes out, and they might release like 1 or 2 books a year, novels that actually are going to take a little bit of time to read. The comics that come out, a couple times a year. I only buy the trade paperbacks because it's the only way I can afford it. Dang it, comics are so expensive. So I'm like, okay, so a couple of times throughout the year, 5 or 6 times throughout the year, I might buy a little something Star Wars that I have to read. So that's how I've been able to actually stay on top of all of this new canon. So I, for one, was really happy when Disney was like, nope, we're starting over.
See, and for me, the whole reason I did not get into the Star Wars extended universe more than I did, which I mentioned in an early episode, was because I'd already done the Dragonlance canon. Yeah. I had already seen a canon sprawl out of control and give me way too much of characters that I used to like, and now I'm just reaching a point of, how much can this person really fit in their life? Seriously. Like, you're telling me that this person has never had more than 3 months downtime in their entire life because there is always some improbably ludicrous adventure that laser targets that specific person while everyone around them is living normal lives, and they just keep rolling through adventure after adventure after adventure ad nauseum. And I looked at Star Wars and all that had been written, and I went, I guarantee you they're doing the same thing here, and I can't do that with Star Wars.
I will say, yeah. The current Star Wars comics, there are different ongoing series right now. There's Aphra, there's Darth Vader, there's then there's the main Star Wars one just called Star Wars, where it's primarily focusing on the big 3, Luke, Leia, Han.
Yep.
And it is very much suffering through that, because this whole comic series is supposed to be taking place between episode 4 and 5, which, granted, in the timeline of Star Wars is a couple years. It's like 3 years or something like that. But I'm looking at these comics going, geez, like, you're a busy man, Luke. And then some of the novels that have been written are also taking place in that same time period. And so it is suffering a little bit from that. I just have to ignore that part and
it happens.
Forget
But it's an inevitability
Yeah.
of a sprawling universe, especially where you keep focusing on those central characters. My favorite Dragonlance books over time grew to be ones that were set in other places with different characters in different, part of the same reason that some of my favorite Star Wars extended universe stuff was the Knights of the Old Republic games and what they spawned, because it was just they just said, you know what,
There's
too much continuity. Yeah. It's too busy.
Yeah.
There's too much to take into account. we're just going to go so far from the original series that we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, you got a little bit of breathing room.
And just be able to hand wave and say, nope, everything changed over the 4,000 freaking years. Everything changed except for the advance of technology. Anyway.
Don't talk about that.
but they're basically saying, we're going to do a Star Wars story, but we don't want to be beholden to anything but the world. We want the world. We want the Force. We want the Jedi. We want the Sith. But we don't want to have to labor under the burden of the Skywalker dynasty. We don't want to have to worry about whether or not Obi-Wan could logically be here when he has already been at these places and all of that. Which again is why I don't want more Obi-Wan stories. Clone Wars has already given us, and that was war. I can buy him having a whole ton of stuff, especially because he is a Jedi.
And a general in the army.
General. Yeah. But there just comes a point where it's like where the part of his life where they're specifically telling us, he was in hiding. Well, that should probably be relatively quiet, logically.
We could just have a movie where Obi-Wan's just watching his stories, watching his soap operas. He's got like the beer belly.
Or do we want to do
I'm sure Ewan wouldn't be disappointed in that at all. If they had Alan Tudyk play him, I would enjoy it.
Oh my gosh.
Obi-Wan peaked in high school. He's
Obi-Wan peaked in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, he kind of did though. Oh shoot.
Got dark. I don't know.
Anyway,
let's not defame Obi-Wan. Let's just leave him on his pedestal.
Some disadvantages of the change, right? I'm going to actually roll these 2 bullet points into one for a moment here. We've got losing some of the older diehard fans and confusion as to what is canon. I'm going to roll those together for a moment because I have a story that kind of encapsulates both of those at once. So next episode, we're doing our Star Wars villains bracket. And some of the villains on this bracket that kind of placed there, I had to go through and research to find out who the heck they were. One of them I saw was a fellow named Rook. I'm assuming I'm saying right. If I'm not, I don't care. Now, Rook, I saw his name and I went, that sounds familiar.
As pronounced in canon, it's Rook.
Rook, thank you. Okay, well, I don't care. Yeah. Rook went to... Rook, I saw the name and I went, oh, I know who that is. I know exactly who Rook is. And then I went, wait, I don't know if what I know about him is accurate anymore. Because I was surprised to see the name at all. I was like, oh, we're drawing from the Timothy Zahn books. That's awesome. And then I went, wait, nothing else on here is explicitly drawing from those books. We don't have Jarush Kaboth or whatever his name is. We don't have all these others.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I stopped and I went to Wikipedia. I looked up Rook and I switched it from. I originally got the Legends canon and went, oh cool, and then realized, oh wait, I'm on the Legends tab. Let me switch over to. So I had a period of confusion there where I was like, where I didn't know who we were talking about. I didn't know if what I knew was accurate, and even with the we're going to be diehard about continuity, there's still going to be plenty of confusions when people are just talking to each other. There's a lot of missed cross streams and not knowing what's going on. Then came the second problem, the losing the older diehard fans, which one of the points we've got on the positives is we're able to improve on old ideas, but that assumes that everything that's going to be done is
an improvement.
Yeah. Which I picked up Rook and I found, okay, Rook is in Rebels, I believe it was.
Yes, Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah. And I read his storyline and I went, this isn't, why did they even bother to give this character they described here that name and appearance? Because he is so completely different from what he was in the originals, completely more boring comparatively. I really liked the old character. He was this very honor-bound who had been lied to and betrayed, and there was also some cliches in some ways, but he was well done, and I enjoyed him. I liked him, and I read this, and I was just like, this is just some guy. This is just some minor antagonist that was kind of a problem, kind of not, and then gone. And it's nothing. It's nothing like the old one. They only took his name so that the diehard fans could go, oh, it's Rook. We love Rook. But then that's just a betrayal in a way, because it's like you get to the end and it's like, no, it's not. Why are you even calling this? It's like when I watched The Amazing Spider-Man and I'm like, this isn't Peter Parker. Why are you even calling this person Peter Parker? Like, he's a fine character in his own right, sure. He's not Peter Parker. Why are you even bothering to give him the name if you're not going to keep the personality? Just give me someone else's Spider-Man. A lot of people are going to be pissed at that, though. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, that's been kind of the theme of this episode is the good things that Disney does also create their own problems. You know, you avoid one problem by making another.
And like I said, I feel like it's inevitably, it doesn't matter what holocron you have, it doesn't matter who you have saying, oh, we're going to keep the continuity. It's going to fall apart eventually.
Yeah.
It's gonna you're gonna disillusion a lot of fans with that. A lot of fans are gonna want different things and are not gonna get it, and so you're gonna get the bitter fights that you've had over so many things coming out, because you need that breadth if you're gonna keep it original. But if you're not, unless the fans can somehow learn to go, you know what, I know it's all canon, but I'm just gonna ignore the parts I don't like and not worry about them, it's gonna be really ugly in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I would also add that I feel like they're already failing at keeping the continuity. One of my biggest problems with Rogue One is that it does not match up with Episode 4. You know, it's like after watching Rogue One, I went, okay, so that opening scene, Vader arriving on the blockade runner, should go something along the lines are, stolen plans were laboriously carried aboard this ship, not beamed aboard this ship. And then the guy that he's choking goes, "We're a diplomatic envoy on a mission of peace," or whatever he says. I'm sorry, I don't know it. I once could quote that word for word, but I no longer can. That's the section my movie did not have. We didn't record that, so that's the part I know least. But he says all that, and really what Vader should be saying...
This is an ambassadorship. We're on a diplomatic mission.
And what Vader should be saying right there is, really? You're even gonna try that? Like, I literally watched two people carry the plans aboard this ship in the middle of a battle with the rebels above in restricted territory where no one had any right to be. Hey. And you're gonna try and go, oh, we're innocent, dude.
See, and
then 5 minutes later, Leia does the exact same thing. And Vader should be sitting there going, how stupid do you morons think I am? I literally watched you carry them aboard the ship. I watched this ship fly away with my own mechanically enhanced eyes. And you know what? Finally, he doesn't say that. It's a small thing. It's a very small continuity thing. But it doesn't match. There is no logical reason for any of them to even attempt to make that
there
happen.
is. No, they need to have...
I was going to say save it for the Rogue One show, because I have a lot of things that I want to say, but I'm going to
just one point
them in the... Okay,
just one point that's honestly more of a joke.
I will allow you one.
It's more of a joke than it is actually an actual thing, but I just want to say it anyway. They have to have a story for the in-flight recorder. Come on, man. The Senate wasn't actually gone at that point, by the way. There's still a few more minutes in the movie before that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. But Vader is literally walking around with a machine on his face. If you're going to tell me that can't record, isn't recording what he's seen,
he got their license plate.
It's like I literally watched the ship fly out of a restricted area. Like there's no point in even attempting.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's a very little thing, but it is not the
I will
continuity.
give you
is
that
not
point,
meshing.
even though I'm still going to defend it in the Rogue One episode.
No, and that's fine. And like I said, it's a little thing. It's one of those things that, logically we should just sit back and go, oh, yeah, we're going to let that fly. Except the whole point of wiping out Legends canon was so that everything would mesh up. We're going to have one canon. Yeah. And here we are. The movies themselves do not match up with what's being released. And there's Rogue One is rife with just little things like that where it's like, well, wait, that doesn't really make sense. Why did they do this then in that next movie, in episode 4, if this is the backstory here? Like, so many little things that I'm just like, that they're not a huge problem. Normally in a movie that I enjoy, I can just go, whatever. Plot holes, big deal, who cares? But I didn't enjoy that one, and so I don't. They never got me into a frame of mind where I could go, who cares? It's like, no, my disbelief was not suspended, and so all these just piled up even higher. And so I would argue that they're already failing to keep the continuity, and it's only going to get worse over time, and eventually we're going to be in a similar situation where I liken it to, I'm an editor and a writer, so I liken it to descriptivism versus prescriptivism. Which, if you are not familiar with grammar usage and how that builds up, there are two schools of thought for editors, for anyone whose job is to edit people's writing or to look over it or to judge it. You have prescriptivism and you have descriptivism. Prescriptivism is saying, these are the rules of grammar, and this is how it has to be used, and if you're not using it, you are breaking the language and you are wrong. Descriptivism is saying, language is an evolving mess, and it's used all over the place, and if 90% of the people speaking English are using this word or this grammatical principle in this way, who are we to say that they can't? Because we're not going to stop them. It's happening, it's going to continue happening, And so you've got these two schools of thought where it's like, okay, if you want to appear professional, this is how you need to write. That's just logically for this usage, this is how you should write. But when you've got the so-called grammar Nazis that are picking apart people's posts on Facebook, screw you idiots. These people are communicating clearly that is the purpose of language, and it's a post on Facebook. It doesn't matter. Their grammar does not matter. And I, if you can't tell, am a hardcore descriptivist. Unless there is a compelling reason why someone should not use language in a certain way in a certain situation, I don't care. It's a fool's errand to try and control how people use language. People will use language how they want. The language will evolve independently of what the naysayers, what the people who would control it, say. They can't actually control language. Nobody can in the long run. You can slow it down maybe a bit, but eventually it's gonna change one way or the other. I look at Star Wars canon.
Historian here can confirm.
Yeah, any sort of canon, I see very similar parallels there, where it's like, you know what? Yeah, okay, let's keep control of this. Let's try and make a solid continuity so that no one is ever jarred out of the story by something that doesn't mesh up, like I already have been. But that's the thing. If you're going to tell a story that is so closely adjacent to another one, that's going to happen. It's not a Rogue One thing. That happens anytime someone writes a prequel or a sequel that is, especially prequels, that are too close to the original that you cannot handwave things, where it's like, this one literally ends and then picks up. Minutes have passed.
10 hours, actually.
Okay.
Apparently is the official...
10 hours with not a lot of action in between.
600 minutes have passed.
Yeah.
And it's not enough time to handwave a lot of the details that they set up, and that happens all the time. Yeah. The more we write, the more we create that is adjacent to everything else we're making, the more that discontinuity is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's always going to happen. We can control it for a while, but eventually it will spiral out of control, and Disney or someone is going to have to go, oh god, we've got the same mess we started. Which doesn't mean they shouldn't try and control it. Like I said, they made the right choice wiping out Legends because it already was a mess. It's fine to say, you know what, let's start from not a mess and try and keep that mess under control as long as we can, but inevitably it will spiral out of control, and we will have
and that's what I'm saying, like, in an imperfect world that we live in, like, your choices are either do what Lucas did, which descends into mess and chaos almost instantly, or try to control it, and eventually the entropy will overtake.
But which is why I'm saying I feel like they need to find a way to do what comics have done. They need to find a way to give various versions, even though it doesn't make in-universe sense to have multiple parallel dimensions or whatever.
Well, and I think the way they could do it is by just start making movies in different periods. You know, like, hey, let's do a trilogy set in the Old Republic.
And which is why, like I said, I want more that are set out further. Instead of Rogue Ones that are right adjacent where we're... And Solo. That's one of my problems with Solo, too, is that there are a lot of little things that it's like, well, but does that really fit with what we've already been shown? I guess I can sort of buy that, but that's a stretch. You know, what are the odds that every defining characteristic that we know from Han Solo in the original trilogy was something that he learned or gained in a 12-hour period of writing with Tobias Beckett? You know, like... Yeah. It seems like a stretch.
Setting the stories out, I mean, taking a minute or two back, I'm sorry, but...
No,
fixated on it.
I was ranting. Thank you for not
Well, sure. Setting stories out... That's right. Setting stories out far enough away only works so much. But we see that from the Old Republic games themselves, with you having the Jedi Order versus the Sith Order at that point, when we don't have any sort of precedent for that in the actual canon, right? Mm-hmm. So you have you didn't play those, right? You didn't play Old Republic. So you have...
I never did.
I know.
I didn't play the Old Republic MMO, but I love
and I felt
even
that about
the
this
extremely broken Knights of the Old Republic 2. I love.
Right. So in Knights of the Old Republic, you had the regular Jedi Order on Coruscant, just as we have it in the films. But then you also had a Sith Order. I don't remember what they call it. It's been too long since I've played it. But you had Sith Stormtroopers. They even actually used the Empire or something closer to the Empire logo. And that was your major antagonist, was a Sith Order, which, I mean, they explained it, and sure, okay, you can say it's just a different structure, and Yoda was talking about, only having pairs of people rather than only two Sith.
The current continuity explanation for that is there were a bunch of Sith, and they wiped out each other through infighting or being hunted down by Jedi, and Bane went, whoa, if we're all evil and stabbing each other in the back, that size of an order is not a tenable structure.
Yeah, so let's do 2.
So we're going to institute the rule of 2.
Is that part of current canon?
Yeah, that is current canon. That Darth Bane said, "Okay, yeah, exactly."
I had to
like
look
Chris,
up Bane for our villains back.
just
Okay,
like Chris
so I
was
just read
saying,
this.
is he said it is untenable. So here's what it is: there's going to be a master and an apprentice. Always 2 there are, and here's how you'll know who's the tougher. When the apprentice is strong enough to kill the master, great, you have earned the spot of being
and
the
Bane's
master.
rule of 2, not necessarily under that name, but that's actually continuity in both Legends and
Yes.
current canon.
Yeah, so that's the rule of 2. That's why Yoda's.
But no, there are
speaking that.
discrepancies. It is super, like I said, it's super weird that 4,000 years ago they had a level of technology that really isn't that different from what came about later.
Well,
and sure, you can explain that with huge imperial downfalls and dark.
Not
ages
even
and this,
necessarily.
that,
I would say
to
look
a
at
certain
human
degree.
history.
Yeah,
Human history, technology didn't advance terribly for thousands of years.
yeah.
3000 BC, you
But
got
that's-
the Egyptian Empire.
But at the same time, what we have seen of modern technology
Oh,
is that
sure.
it advances frighteningly quickly,
Sure.
more quickly
Well,
than we can keep
But
up with.
what happens is you have, and again, this is the historian in me, the professional historian coming out. What you have is bursts of technology that sort of throw you forward, where technology advances quite rapidly for a little bit, and then things sort of plateau for a little while. Then bursts of technology
But
plateau
I would
for a
argue
while.
that you would be hard pressed to find a 4,000-year gap.
Sure,
that
yeah,
looks as
yeah.
similar.
No,
Now,
I'm not
granted-
saying it's perfect.
Granted,
but
the amount of time we're working with, like if you go back to cavemen over a 4,000-year period, yeah, sure. But in with any sort of technology level that we would really call technology at all, even just farming techniques, you're not going to find a 4,000-year gap that is going to look as similar as Knights
Sure.
of the Old Republic and modern stuff.
yeah, that's I'll
which
give
is
you that.
I can hand wave because I like it.
Yeah.
It's like I'm happy to have a Star Wars story that does not depend on this massive web of tangled continuity, that is not a Skywalker dynasty story.
And
that
then
is-
you want to throw
or adja-
technological
or adjacent
advancement
to all
into that?
or adjacent to all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they still want it to feel like Star Wars, so lightsabers have still got to be around.
Yeah.
Jedi and Sith are still got to be around. They did dumb down the technology in a few ways to make it a little
Well,
less,
and they
but still
specifically
have
mentioned
droids,
too
intelligent
that,
droids
that
walking around.
lightsabers are an ancient weapon.
Yeah,
You know,
but
so
it's
that's-
like we've still got
yeah.
intelligent droids walking around.
Yeah.
Which is funny, when it's like, if droids have been part of galactic culture for 4,000 years, is it really that logical that we still have people pointing at them and going, "We don't serve their kind here. We still have
but
that
it
much
is.
hatred"?
The
That's
Clone
fair,
Wars.
that's fair. And
the
over-
Clone
oh,
Wars
the Clone Wars
developed a
were part of it. Yeah, that's
significant hatred and mistrust of droids because of the chaos and war they caused in the galaxy.
Anyway.
Hashtag droids live matter.
Well,
Or do they?
I have a fun
Anyway.
I have a fun rant about one particular droid in the Star Wars universe, and but I'll save that for
yeah.
another episode. So, we've got a mess.
Yep.
I think I'd sum up
It's
as
a mess
saying,
we love. It's a mess that maybe is less of a mess than it was before. Overall, in other ways, more. In other ways, less. But it's the mess that we all know and love. It's Star Wars.
Yeah.
We're all going to love it, kind of no matter what they put out, really.
Yeah.
I'd say my final thoughts are like, yeah, I get your pain if you lost something you love. If you're looking at Rook like I am and going, this isn't what I knew. Why did you do this? I get it. I feel you. But at the same time, there's not a lot they could have done better.
Yep.
Everybody's going to have something that makes them go, oh, but no.
Yep.
Not for me. We can all commiserate that, hey, at least we also have things that we're like, well, that's pretty darn awesome. I
Yep.
like that
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, I'm most the same. That it's good that what they did. Yeah, there's some growing pains with it, but it was necessary.
Yep. Well, I think that about wraps it up then for this episode. I want to thank everybody for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time. Next time we'll be doing, as we've mentioned a couple times this episode, we're so excited. We're doing a Star Wars villains bracket. We're going to find out who would win in a Hunger Games, like death match kind of a matchup here. Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we can get some fun in there, subvert your expectations a little bit, right? Get some upset some maybe traditional winners. We'll see. As always, though, we want you to go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter @MoreCivilized, and also join our Facebook group, A More Civilized Podcast. Go and join the fun there.
Also, if you would like easier access to the podcasts, they are at amorecivilisedpodcast.podbean.com. You can follow myself on Twitter @Mr__Rstar, and that's the actual underscore item, not the word underscore. I'm worried someone might mistake
Yeah, that's
that. So,
And I'm going to.
It makes me want to make a Twitter that's like _! Or something all spelled out.
I want to put one that's at actual underscore this then type out actual underscore. I'm gonna take a moment to plug. I've got a couple stories that if you went and listened to my free story on the Flash Friday Fiction podcast and you want more, or you just feel like being nice to me, if you find the Deep Magic e-zine, I have a pair of stories: The Wizard's Granddaughter in the October 2016 volume, and Vanya and the Rusalka in the Spring 2018 volume. So please.
They're so good.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it. So
Yep.
thank you all for listening, and may the Force be with you all.
always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to a more civilized podcast.
Yeah, so
Say whatever we want now.
Just give me
Jar Jar's the best.